Welcome back. Hong Kong's opposition pro-democracy movement has made unprecedented gains in the city's district council elections. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi says Hong Kong is a part of China no matter what happens in the polls. Early results show pro-democracy candidates have won 390 out of the 452 seats. Over 3 million people voted in the elections on a 71% turnout, beating the record set in 2016 elections. After the defeat, Hong Kong's leader Carrie Lam said her government will listen humbly to public demands. There were no protests and people voted peacefully in numbers. The city has endured months of mass rallies and violent anti-government demonstrations. For more insight into this story, we are joined by our Hong Kong correspondent, Grace Lee. Grace, that the results are in, should we expect the protest movement to settle down or intensify?
Well, for now, it seems like people are celebrating what has happened in the elections. We're already seeing people coming out onto the streets in Central during lunchtime, having a glass of champagne and patting each other on the back for a successful kind of pro-democracy takeover of the local elections. And it is seen as a signal to these democracy protesters that potentially this may be the push that they need to continue on in their fight for pro-democracy here. And of course, there are still some people holed up in Polytechnic University at this time, and they want to go to that area tonight to show their support for those left behind as well. It is seen as a signal for them to continue on in this move.
The pro-democracy candidates that won elections in 2003 were voted out after one term. What are people's expectations this time around?
Well, I think it's a little bit different this time around because it really wasn't about the elections at all. It was actually more about the message that they wanted to send to Beijing through this election. And also, this election was kind of seen as a measurement of how much the protest movement here still has any kind of support from the overall Hong Kong people. There was a lot of worry as we continue to see some very heavy clashes between protesters and police and some increasingly violent movement from the protesters that perhaps they were losing support from the general public. But as we saw people coming to the polls and still voting for democracy, it seems that they still have this kind of support. So that's really what protesters were hoping for here.
You've said about the results being more about the message. What does the result mean for the future of Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam?
So the district councillors don't have any kind of overwhelming power. They're not allowed to make laws or veto on any legislation. But what they do get to do is have a small say in who becomes Hong Kong's next leader. They sit in about 10% of the panel that chooses Hong Kong's leader will be made up of these district councillors. So that's how pro-democracy camps here are hoping to influence Hong Kong's leadership. But so far, it's not clear what this might mean for Carrie Lam, but certainly they will look to elect someone or look for someone who's a little bit more left-leaning when it comes to Hong Kong's leadership in the future.
Thank you, Grace. We were speaking to our Hong Kong correspondent, Grace Lee. Iran and the International Atomic Energy Agency have agreed to cooperate on 4 new nuclear projects in the country. Iran's ambassador Kazem Karibabadi says the projects financed by the IAEA are worth more than 1 million euros. The Iranian envoy says the new cooperation was agreed at a Board of Governors meeting. Abadi says the cooperation includes the promotion of nuclear research, reactors, security, and human resources. He says the promotion of producers' capacity and waste management is part of the collaboration. Abadi went on to say 2 power stations projects and cancer cooperation are already underway and will continue over the next 2 years. The Netherlands' Queen Maxima has arrived in Islamabad on a 2-day visit to Pakistan. She is visiting as the UN Secretary General's Special Advocate for Inclusive Finance for Development. During the visit, she will meet President Arif Alvi and Prime Minister Imran Khan. The Queen will speak with international development partners and representatives from the fintech sector. She will also meet the Governor of the State Bank of Pakistan, Reza Bakir, and the Prime Minister's financial advisor, Abdul Hafiz Sheikh. Pakistan's Foreign Office said Queen Maxima will also attend the launch of the micro-payment gateway. New Delhi has confined an Indian civil society fact-finding delegation to Srinagar, refusing it access to the rest of occupied Kashmir. The 5-member delegation, led by former Union Minister Yashwant Sinha, has slammed New Delhi's claim of normalcy in the valley. Concerned citizens group says they have been told to stay in a hotel in Srinagar. The group told media that police stopped them from going to Pulwama and Budgam districts. Sinha earlier debunked New Delhi's claims of normalcy in the valley, saying Kashmiris are in distress and angry at the current crisis. The occupied valley is reeling under India's curfew and communications blackout for the last 113 days. In Afghanistan, a grenade attack on a United Nations vehicle has killed a foreign national in Kabul. A government official said 5 others were wounded in the attack. No group has yet claimed responsibility. The explosion comes after a period of relative calm in the Afghan capital. The United Nations condemned the attack in the strongest possible terms. It called on Afghan authorities to investigate the attack and bring the perpetrators to justice. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party has decided to hold a leadership vote after his indictment on corruption charges. Gideon Saar, a Likud lawmaker who has challenged Netanyahu, said he welcomes the Prime Minister's agreement to hold primaries for party leadership. Last week, Netanyahu was charged with bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in a set of long-running corruption cases. Earlier, Blue and White Party head Benny Gantz said Netanyahu is threatening a civil war with inciting statements. Meanwhile, Palestinian officials say they will launch a campaign against U.S. support for Israeli settlements in the West Bank. Fatah Party member Abbas Zaki said it will include mass rallies and special protests by Palestinian leadership at the UN and International Criminal Court. U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper has forced out the country's Navy Chief Richard Spencer over his handling of a Navy SEAL's misconduct case. This ends the Navy's efforts to carry out a peer review that could have forced Edward Gallagher out of the elite force. Gallagher was accused of war crimes over his conduct in the Iraq War, but was only convicted of illegally posing for a photo with a detainee's corpse. Spencer demoted Gallagher after the trial, removing his status as a Navy SEAL. Esper said the officer should be allowed to retain his SEAL's trident pin. In a letter, Spencer defended the need to preserve good order and discipline in the ranks. The Pentagon also accused Spencer of opening a private communication channel with the White House. Spokesperson Jonathan Hoffman said Spencer contradicted his public position by proposing to restore Gallagher's rank. Former New York mayor and billionaire businessman Michael Bloomberg has jumped into the U.S. presidential race. He joined 17 other candidates vying for the Democratic nomination to take on President Donald Trump in 2020. The ex-mayor said he is standing to defeat Donald Trump and rebuild America. He said the U.S. cannot afford 4 more years of President Trump's reckless and unethical actions. According to Forbes, Bloomberg is the 8th richest American with an estimated net worth of over $53 billion. Bolivia's interim president, Jeanine Áñez, has passed a bill appointing a new board that will set a date for a general election. It annuls the contested October 20th elections and limits presidents to 2 terms. Under the bill, new judges will be appointed for Bolivia's Supreme Electoral Tribunal within 20 days of enforcement. The judges will have 2 days to announce the election schedule. Áñez said it took quite an effort to reach consensus to adopt the document unanimously.
Llegamos a este día.
We have arrived at this day with the satisfaction that a duty has been fulfilled, because this is the main objective of my government. New elections in the shortest amount of time possible. It has not been easy to build consensus to unanimously pass this law.
Aprobar por unanimidad esta ley.
We're taking a short break. Stay with us. Romania's President Klaus Iohannis has won a second term in a runoff after winning the first round on November 10th. Iohannis crushed his socialist challenger Viorisa Dancila by 26% lead in the final round. Two separate exit polls showed centre-right Iohannis garnered 63% of the votes in the runoff. Former Prime Minister Dancila of the left-leaning PSD took nearly 37% vote. In his victory speech, Iohannis said modern Romania won the polls.
Romania has won. The modern Romania, the European Romania, the modern Romania has won today. The Romanians were today's heroes. The number of people who went out to vote was impressive. This is the biggest victory of today, the fact that the Romanians went out to vote.
UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has launched the Conservative Party's election manifesto, promising to forge a new Britain. Speaking at the event, Johnson said his government will get Brexit done. He promised 50,000 more nurses in England and the creation of 50 million more appointments for people to see their general practitioner. The Prime Minister made other pledges, including tighter immigration controls and maintaining the rate of income tax. Meanwhile, the opposition Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn criticised the Tories' manifesto, saying it will only favour the rich. In Belgium, thousands of people have taken to the streets of Brussels to call for an end to violence against women. This follows similar demonstrations in France and Italy. Protesters in Belgian capital paid tribute to women killed by their partners. They marched on to the Palace of Justice, where they placed pairs of red shoes as a reminder of women killed by domestic violence. Protesters demanded an end to violence against women and children and punishment for its perpetrators. This year, 22 women have been killed by men in acts of domestic violence in Belgium. Today is the UN International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. The Arab League Parliament has asked the US to remove Sudan from its list of countries sponsoring terrorism. In a statement, Parliament Speaker Mishal bin Fahm al-Salami said she made the request in letters to US officials. Al-Salami said the letters have been sent to US Vice President Mike Pence, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. He said the Parliament unanimously decided to request to remove Sudan from Washington's sponsoring terrorism countries list. Al-Salami said Sudan has implemented all of its commitments to fight terrorism and promote human rights. Sudan was added to the US list of state sponsors for terrorism in 1993 during the rule of former Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir. In Kenya, the death toll from landslides caused by heavy rains has risen to at least 56 people. A government official says the victims have been confirmed dead, but an unknown number are still missing. He said police helicopters are struggling to reach flooded areas due to rain and fog. Experts warn that warming oceans are causing unpredictable weather patterns in East Africa. More than 50 people have died in heavy rain and flooding, while hundreds of thousands have been forced from their homes since October. As smog continues to plague the Indian capital, the residents of New Delhi slammed the Indian government over its failure to tackle the problem. The city's air quality index stood at 212 on Sunday morning, which is over 3 times the safe limit of 60. This report has all the details.
The citizens of New Delhi lambasted the Indian government, saying the government had failed to find a solution to the smog problem, despite the fact that it had become a regular occurrence in recent years.
Pollution is a grievous ailment in Delhi, and the government is not working towards solving the problem. Everybody, including the country's youth, children, and the elderly, are being affected severely due to the pollution.
Indian authorities implemented an odd-even car rationing system in the capital, which aims to reduce vehicular emissions. But this has done little to improve this situation. Meanwhile, residents complain farmers continue to burn leftover crops in New Delhi's outskirts. despite the practice being banned by the apex court.
This is the story of every year. The government will have to take some concrete steps, be it the Delhi government or central government, and accusations will not work, but the public also needs to be aware about how we can reduce air pollution, or at least how it can be controlled.
Inhaling airborne pollutants can cause a number of ailments, including asthma, sore throat, and lung cancer. Children, the elderly, and people with pre-existing conditions are most vulnerable to these health risks.
Stock markets across Asia are trading higher amid U.S. National Security Advisor's comments hinting at the likelihood of an initial trade deal with China. Hong Kong's Hang Seng is trading over 1.5% higher, with shares of life insurer AIA surging over 3%. The index jumped after pro-democracy candidates surged to a landslide victory following a record voter turnout. Seoul's Kospi has gained 1% as shares of industry heavyweight Samsung Electronics added more than 1%. Tokyo's Nikkei 225 picked up over 0.5%, with shares of index heavyweights fast retailing SoftBank Group and Fanuc all witnessing gains. The Shanghai Composite is also trading nearly 0.5% higher over trade deal hopes. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.